This is the second part of our lesson about measuring advertising effectiveness. And this include the topic methods of measurements. So methods of measuring advertising effectiveness, there includes two measures, direct and indirect measures. Now, direct measures of advertising effectiveness, the relationship between advertising and sales is established. So, a comparison of sales of two periods or two markets may be done and the corresponding changes may be noted. So, the following are some of the methods that are generally used in measuring that advertising effects. The first one is historical sales method. So, some insights into the effectiveness of past advertising may be obtained by the measuring of relationship between the advertising expenditure and the total sales of the product. So, a multiple regression analysis of advertising expenditure and sales over several time periods may be calculated. So, it would show how the changes in advertising expenditures have corresponding changes in sales volume. So, this technique estimates the contribution that advertising has made to explaining in a correlational manner than a casual sales. So, the variation in sales over the time periods covered in this study. So, in this historical sales method, the company would base it in the past sales or advertising expenditure, and then you have to compare it to the sales of the company. So in that way, the company would be able to decide or to improve their advertising and also to cut maybe to cut their cost in the advertising expenses, or you have to, even though you have to increase the sales, let's say for example, um in the past advertising expenditure, they have a one, or they spent 50,000 for the whole year of advertising their product, and then even though it's 50,000, their sales profit increases. So it means that their advertising effort were effective. But then in that current year, for example, 2022, they need to create another advertising campaign. Then you have to evaluate, the company would evaluate that previous history. So it is very important that as an advertiser, as a company, you have to also know your budget for the advertisement, if this budget would would increase the sales or would lower the sales volume of your product. Now let's go to the experimental control. This measure of advertising effectiveness is the method of experimental control, where a causal relationship between advertising and sales is established. This method is quite expensive when related to other advertising effectiveness measures, yet it is possible to isolate advertising contribution to sales. So, moreover, this can be done as a pretest to aid advertising in choosing between alternative creative media designs and media schedules, expenditures levels, or some combination of these advertising decision areas. One experimental approach to measuring the sales effectiveness of advertising is test marketing. So in here, experimental, from the word experimental itself. So you have to experiment. For example, which platform are effective. For example, if you publish your advertisement in a radio or in the online and internet like Facebook. So which one would you have to experiment which platform are effective in posting your advertisement. So they're under the experimental control. There are two methods also, the before after with control group design and the multivariable experimental design. So before after with control group, this classic design uses several tests and controls cities, and in this design two types of cities are selected. So cities in which advertising campaigns are affected may be named as test cities, and other cities may be called central cities. So first of all, the normal sales level is calculated for both type of cities prior to advertising campaign. And then the advertising campaign is presented to the test cities and not the central cities. So the effect of that advertising campaign can then be measured by subtracting the amount of the post-campaign figure of sale from the pre-campaign sale figures in test cities. So in this campaign, you have to have, for example, in Canlaon or in you have to compare San Carlos. So in you have two test cities. So you have to which uh, cities gained more or which cities attracts more customers based on your advertisement. And then the second one is multivariable experimental designs. So while the experimental design discussed above yield a reasonably accurate estimate of the effects of advertising on sales, it is not successful in explaining the success or failure of the campaign itself. Multivariable designs produce these explanations and are therefore used by some very large firm because of their diagnostic value. So the power of this multivariable factorial design is explained by G.H. Brown, or former Ford's director of marketing research. So he said that for any single medium, eight possible geographic areas have been exposed and eight have not been exposed. Thus, in this experimental model, it is possible to evaluate how each individual's medium behaves alone, and in all possible to evaluate how each individual medium behaves alone and in all possible combinations with other media. So there's a comparison between different media. So you have to, and based on your experiment, you have to come up which advertisement is more effective. Now let's go to the indirect measures of advertising effectiveness. So as it's very difficult to measure the direct effect of advertising on companies' profits or sales, most firms rely heavily on indirect measures. So these measures do not evaluate the effects of advertisement directing on sales or profits, but all other factors such as customer awareness or attitude or customer recall of advertising message affect the sales or profits or goals of the business indirectly. So despite the uncertainties about the relationship between the intermediate effects of advertising and the ultimate results, there is no other alternative but to use indirect measures. So the most commonly used measures are exposure to advertisement, attention or recall of advertising message content, brand awareness, comprehension, attitude change, and action. Now let's go to exposure to advertisement. In order to be effective, the advertisement must gain exposure, of course. The management is concerned about the number of target audiences who see or hear the organization message set in the advertisement. Without exposure, advertisement is bound to failure. So, marketers or advertisers may obtain an idea of exposure generated by the medium by examining or its circulation or audience data, which reveal the number of copies of the magazine, newspaper, or journal sold, the number of persons passing the billboards or riding in transit facilities, or the numbers of persons living in a televiewing or radio listening area, and the number of persons switching on their TV and radio sets of various points of time. So this number can be estimated by interviewing the numbers of the audience for different media. So it is very important that you have to expose your advertisement. So you have to see to it that, for example, if you have a post ad, so you have to see to it, for example, in the bus terminal. So because there are so many people in that bus terminal, so it is very good. It's a good way to expose your advertisement. And also right now, because many people are using Facebook, so it is also a very good avenue to post your advertisement to gain more exposure. Now the second is attention or recall of advertising message content. This is one of the widely used measures of advertising results. So, under this measure, a recall of the message content among a specified group or groups of prospective customers is measured within 24 hours of the exposure of the advertisement. So, attention value is the chief quality of the advertising copy, and then the advertisement cannot be said to be effective unless they attract the attention of the target customers or consumers. Now, there are two methods of evaluating the attention getting value of the advertisement. One is pre test, and the other is post test. So, in a pre test evaluation, the consumers are asked to indicate the extent to which they recognize or recall the advertisement. So, they have already seen about the advertisement. This test is conducted in the laboratory setting. So here, consumers read, hear, or listen to the advertisement, and then researchers ask questions regarding the advertisement just to test the recall and then evaluate it. So in the post-test method, the consumers are asked questions about the indication of recognition or recall after the advertisement has been run. So these measures assume that customers can recall or recognize what they have viewed or listened to. So various mechanical devices are being used in the Western countries which provide indices of attention such as eye camera. Now let's go to brand awareness. So the marketers who rely heavily on advertising often appraise its effectiveness by measuring the customer's awareness about the particular product or brand. And then the assumption of this type of measures is that there is a direct relationship between the advertisement and the awareness. So this type of measure is also subject to the criticism as is applicable to direct measures of effectiveness, such as sales measures, because awareness is also not the direct result of the advertisement. It is also affected by many other factors. But for new products, changes in awareness can often be attributed to the influence of advertising. So it is very important that your target consumers or customers must be aware of your brand. So, as we all know that, for example, the Nike brand. So it is most customers are very aware of that brand, so there's a tendency that they will buy that product because that product is reliable, or it's already in the market for so long, and many consumers in the past already use that brand. So it is very important that as a uh, company, you have to make your advertisement or brand noticeable by the consumers. Then next one is comprehension. So consumers generally use advertisements as a means of obtaining information about the product, so brand or the manufacturer. So they cannot be informed unless they comprehend the message or grasp the message mentally and understand it fully. So various tests for evaluating comprehension are available. One is recall test, an indicator of comprehension because it is evident that consumers recall what they comprehend. Of course, it is very easy to recall if you understand what you are watching or what they advertisers wanted to convey on their advertisement. So another measure of the variable is to ask questions about subjects, how much they have comprehended, or they have comprehended the message they have recently heard or seen. So one may employ somewhat imprecise tests of the comprehension of a newspaper and radio advertisement. So one may ask typical target consumers from time to time such questions like, what did you think of our new commercial? And did it get the message across? So the answers of these questions will provide sufficient insight into advertising decision making. So one way also of knowing, for example, if you're a company and you have a new advertisements and then you want to know how much the consumers comprehend your advertisement, or what did they think of of your new commercial. So one way is by conducting online survey. So like for example, if you already joined the Rakuten or survey or Tuluna, you have there in that site, it's a platform wherein companies would post their surveys online in order for them to know if their products or services are effective or what other things that they need to improve. And then the next one is the attitude change. So since advertising is considered to be the way of influencing the state of the mind of the audience towards a product, service, or organization, the result are very often measured in terms of attitudes among groups exposed to advertising communication. So several measures are used, ranging from asking the questions about willingness to buy, the likelihood of buying, to the measurement of the extent to which specific attributes such as modern or new and are associated with a product. And then the next one is action. So one objective of advertisement may be assumed to be stimulate action or behavior. So the action or intention to take an action may be measured on the intention to buy measuring instrument. Under this type of measure, consumers are asked to respond why they are interested in purchasing the product or brand. So this can also be you will also know this one through online survey or face-to-face survey if your target market is within your vicinity. So one type of action that advertisers attempt to induce is buying behavior. So the assumption is that if an increase in sales follows a decrease in advertising expenditures, then this change in sales levels are good indicators of the effectiveness of advertising. Of course, if your expenditure in advertising is low, then you gain more after the advertisement, so it means your advertisement is or was effective. Now logic suggests that measurement of sales is preferable to other measurements. Thus, these above measures, direct or indirect, are used to evaluate the effectiveness of advertisement. It seems that from the analysis of the above methods of measuring advertising effectiveness, that directly or indirectly changes in sales or profits are taken as the measuring rod of the effectiveness of the advertisement. So that ends our discussion about the measuring advertising effectiveness. So if you have any questions, you can post it in our group chat in Facebook. And after you will view this recorded presentation, you can take your quiz and make sure you take or you submit your quiz in the indicated deadline. Okay, have a good day, everyone.